Are you ready to master the waves of medical device product development? Well, wax up your surfboard because you are listening to Inspired by Amua. And here is your medical device product development expert, that Hawaiian-hearted hostess who will help you hang 10, Megan Alonso.
Aloha! Welcome back to Inspired by Amua. Today I have a great guest with me. He's founding principal of Nevium Intellectual Property Solutions. He's a chartered financial analyst with over 20 years of experience in valuations, financial analysis, and corporate finance around the world. He also provides strategic advice for intellectual property, portfolios, transactions, guidance, and he also helps you determine economic damages, profit and civil litigation, and valuations of your trademarks, patents, copyrights, brand assets, trade secrets, technology, and also, here's a bonus, celebrity endorsements, marketing activities, and other intangible assets. So please welcome Brian Buss. Brian, are you ready to hang 10?
Yes, let's go.
All right, let's get into it. So I'm excited to have you on the show today. I know a lot of people, when they're developing medical devices, they think getting the patent is so important, and then they rush into development from there. But I know you have a lot of value to bring to our audience today, just thinking about that more strategically, and not only getting the patent, but then what are you going to do with it, and what's your strategy behind that?
Sure. Yeah, we run into tons of companies. In fact, it's pretty common, and there's about the normal situation is a company probably has a business plan, probably has some idea of a marketing plan, but they rarely, if ever, have an IP plan. So no harm, no foul if you're not sitting there with an IP plan already created, right? And for us, that IP plan is all about how are you going to leverage your intellectual property to sell more products, make more money, perform better financially.
Mm-hmm. Good. So give us a little hint into, if I were a new client knocking on your door saying, I don't have an IP plan, I need an IP plan, where would you start?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is, I guess, they're probably saying, well, why would I want to go create a whole nother plan, right? I got my business plan, everything. And I got my R&D plan, but what about an IP plan? Well, for most companies, especially medical products companies, the majority of the value they're going to create is their intangible assets or their intellectual property. If someone's going to come acquire your business, it's not going to be because you've got great furniture and fixtures or a lot of inventory. It's going to be because you have innovative and new IP. You have something that's different than everybody else. Mm-hmm. And an IP plan, like I said, is all about figuring out specifically how each piece of intellectual property, each patent, each trademark, each proprietary technology, or each trade secret is going to contribute to or increase the profits that you achieve from your business.
Mm-hmm. So give us a little insight into some different strategies that you help your customers and clients with.
Well, we kind of look at IP contributing to value, or creating value is probably a better way to put it, in four ways. And the first is that intellectual property being unique, it gives you a right to act as a monopolist. Everything we do comes from that business perspective, that finance and economics classes from business school and stuff, right? So we bring that business lens to everything we do, and what we're looking for is to see if an IP owner is actually acting like they have a monopoly, or they have a unique position in the marketplace. So if they have that unique position in the marketplace, are they achieving a better selling price for every product they sell? Or are they selling more units of that product than they otherwise would be without the IP? Or are they getting better profit margins? So for companies that are achieving better sales prices and better profit margins, that's how we start to measure the value of their IP. For companies that don't think they're getting as good a profit margin as they could, which is probably a lot of companies, or not selling their products for as high a price as they hope they could. The IP strategy really comes down to researching and identifying ways to achieve a better sales price or achieve a better profit margin based on leveraging the intellectual property assets that the company already has. The other way we look at the value of intellectual property is, could you license out that intellectual property? In other words, give somebody else permission to use your IP and pay you a fee, usually a royalty or some upfront amount of money for permission to use your intellectual properties.
Yeah, I think that the leverage is the key word there, and that's kind of at the core of what companies need to evaluate, and how, okay, great, we have this technology. Why is it beneficial? How are we going to profit from this and maximize it?
Yeah, and so that's what Nevium does. We're basically a consulting service that specializes in helping people identify the benefits they're getting from the IP they have already, or look at other ways to leverage that IP and increase the profits that they're getting from their business. So it's probably a somewhat unique and interesting and niche service, but can be very valuable for the people that we work with, because we're basically searching for ways to make more money with what you already have.
Yeah. So I'm going to circle back on two things here. You mentioned number one, getting acquired, and then number two, licensing. And several people in development think that they're going to stick with it and then develop the product and manufacture it and sell it themselves, which is a huge undertaking. And then during that process, they realize, okay, maybe there's a better way or an easier way, or maybe this is a better fit. So for now, focus on the acquisition strategy and kind of how you help companies shape that.
Okay. Well, any acquirer, especially for a company that's value is based on intellectual property, that acquirer should be focusing on how they're going to leverage the IP that they acquire in the acquisition, right? So first and foremost is having a clean IP portfolio. So working with your IP counsel to make sure that you have clear ownership rights for every patent, every trademark, every copyright that you could possibly own. You want to have a full, clean, and robust IP portfolio so that the acquirer isn't going to find themselves with a whole nest of messes after they made the acquisition, right?
Or surprises.
Sure. Nothing's worse than the acquisition process than you have an offer on the table and they start due diligence and they start finding problems and you start to see that acquisition price shrink and whittle away. Right?
Yeah.
So step one is kind of making sure that the IP portfolio is clean. And then once again, from Nevium's business perspective, we want to see that you're able to communicate how your intellectual property is making a difference for your business, how it's contributing to profitability, how it's enabling you to sell a product for a better price than your competition. And that's really leveraging your IP. That's the IP plan. It's, hey, I've got these patents, I've got these trademarks that gives me monopoly pricing power, and I'm using it. So you can show that potential acquirer, hey, yes, I'm actually leveraging my IP and I'm making a difference, and therefore you should pay me more money for my company. I also think that licensing contracts, which is kind of the other side of that, help in an acquisition, because that's kind of a third-party verification that the innovation that your company has come up with is valued by the marketplace. In fact, somebody else out there said, yeah, I want to use that.
I need it.
I need it.
Yeah.
I'm going to pay you periodically to use it. So that's a great sign to a potential acquirer, right? It kind of eases their mind that their due diligence themselves was accurate and that the value they're seeing is confirmed by the party who's licensing it from you or using that IP. Now, if you don't have any existing license agreements, that's another thing to maybe start thinking about in your IP plan. Who could be a potential licensee? Maybe it's someone who's in a totally different marketplace or a totally different industry, but might value the innovation that you've come up with or need to use it.
Yeah.
to increase the profitability that they can achieve from whatever else they're bringing to the license transaction.
So when you work with clients, obviously it's companies developing products. Do you work on the other side, and do you assist companies that want to acquire or license technology from a different company?
Yes, so we've worked for both types of companies, right?
So Brian has a major advantage here because he's being on both sides. He knows what both sides want and need.
And we also know what red flags really annoy
Yes.
potential acquirers, right? So if we're working with someone who's thinking about being acquired or who's been offered the opportunity to be acquired, we can help them clean up that the due diligence process to make sure you don't run into problems that are going to reduce the actual purchase price.
Mm-hmm.
We're working for people on the buy side or helping them make acquisitions. We're doing everything from going out there to the market to research who's available to be acquired to the formal due diligence, going through checklists, making things are actually owned. And we find some things as bad as, hey, you've been using, here's the name of my company, whatever it is, Acme Inc. Oh, and I don't even own the website for that company name. So some pretty bad stuff that you can find in due diligence when people have gone pretty far down the path of completing.
So besides that example, what are some other red flags that our listeners can avoid from day one? Well, that made me think of trademarking your name. So not only getting the website domain, but making sure that you're not infringing on someone else's trademark when you're choosing your name.
Yeah. For a lot of technology-based companies, trademark's somewhat of an afterthought, right?
Yeah.
And I would make the argument that it's something you should be including in your IP plan from the very beginning. One, making sure you do have rights to the names that you're using, both for your company and any product names.
Mm-hmm.
That you have clean rights to those products. You not only have the trademarks, you have those trademarks in other markets where your products could someday be sold, right? Nothing like the acquirer coming in and saying, hey, I want to bring your products to Europe, and all of a sudden you don't have any trademark rights in Europe.
Yeah.
Plus owning the website domain names to match all your product names and your company names, because trademark is kind of based on use, and if somebody else has got a website that's up and running using your names, you might have some problems going
So do you recommend to buy not only the .com, but maybe if there's a hyphen in there, or if there's a .net, or now there's so many of them, like .co, .us. So what's your strategy on that?
Yeah, now that you can add just about any extension, I think they're loosening those rules to the point where I think you have to do that within reason, because it can add cost too.
Yeah.
Right? And it does depend on a company's resources. But once again, this gets back to what's your IP plan, right? If your plan is to leverage your IP in these markets, maybe you can escape having to do domain registrations in other markets.
Mm-hmm.
Let somebody else worry about that. If your part of your IP plan is letting somebody license not only your technologies but also the product names and trademarks, maybe you need a broader strategy of registering or finding other domain names. So it's going to tie back to that IP plan. What's your plan going forward to leverage your IP?
Yeah.
And I think that instead of guessing as to, hey, how many domain names should I buy, it should match what your plan is.
Mm-hmm. That's good advice. Yeah. So I distracted you. Let's get back to, so we covered the acquisitions. What about licensing? So what are some key things that we need to be thinking about if we want to license the technology now or in the future, and how to build that plan to allow for that?
Okay. So once again, from our business perspective, a license is simply an opportunity to share some amount of total profit with a partner, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like getting married. I mean, you are joining forces with somebody else who's going to do some of the work, and you're doing some of the work, and you guys have to be able to work together. So a license, kind of the first step, is really a very clear identification of what roles your company is going to play and what roles the partner or the other company is going to play. And I think that's step number one in any license, is to figure out, here's what roles our company could play. In other words, we're good at the research, we're good at the naming and the innovation, we're not so good at manufacturing and distribution. So we need to clearly find a licensing partner who has strengths in manufacturing and distribution. It sounds simple, right? But it's one of the things that gets overlooked quite often, and sometimes that real clear designation of roles, no one really knows who's doing what until they sign the agreements. Those are the types of licenses that cause trouble later on, that lead to divorce, right? It's a bad marriage.
So to continue that analogy, you are the minister that marries them, but you also provide the marital counseling.
I think, more the premarital counseling and planning, right? Maybe we're even in there at the match.com phase, right? When we're trying to find them a good partner.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So if the company knows that they're good at, I think last time I said, the R&D and the innovation and the product design, but not so good at manufacturing and distribution, part of the licensing evaluation would be finding companies that are good at the manufacturing and distribution. Ideally, you'd like to find a couple potential partners and kind of have a dating contest, right? To see who can offer you the best opportunity to leverage your IP and to make the license successful.
Yeah. Good.
So too many dating analogies.
Yeah, maybe we can get off that, but it was fun while it lasted, for sure. Let's see. So again, going back to in development, from day one, we've learned that we need, in addition to the other plans we're working on, we need to formulate an IP plan. I know you have some resources for that. So talk about those resources that you guys offer.
Well, I think we do have lots of research databases. We can access information about competitors and comparable companies in all kinds of marketplaces, looking through past merger and acquisition transactions and bringing the details and the success or lack of success of those transactions into your own IP plan. So the extent to which we can bring a lot of outside market information, we're a great resource for that. And sometimes that can be the most helpful thing for a client, is just to know what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
That alone adds a lot of value before you even get to the formalization of an IP plan. But then the other thing we bring is just kind of a different lens, an outside perspective, and the ability to really kind of dig into the numbers and build different models and scenario test and say, okay, well, if the market changes like this, here's how business, your IP plan number one would react and what would happen. We're going to roll up our sleeves and really try and quantify or calculate the impact of your IP plan to show you, well, here's how the numbers, your company's financial performance numbers would change.
Yeah, and I mean that's extremely important, not only for just any product, but especially for a medical product, because there's so many external factors that people need to be paying attention to, not only the competitors and the competitive landscape in that IP area, but what happens if healthcare changes happen, or anything that goes on with the Affordable Care Act and reimbursements, and how that's going to affect your strategy on selling your product, and how that can shape the IP plan. So I can definitely see where your research can really come in and help people look at that from the different lens.
Well, and when we build a model, we take the philosophy that we're teaching our client how to do that model building and using those models going forward.
Okay, that's good.
The first part is bringing a lot of outside information. The second part is bringing a kind of independent voice and lens and perspective to the analysis. And the third part is building those tools. And if we just build this black box tool that no one else knows how to use, it's not very effective client engagement for us. We want to build that model so that the client themselves becomes the expert and can then kind of run their own iterations and test their own strategies going forward. So we're kind of the tool builder, and then we want to be able to teach and hand off that tool to the client for us to judge it as a successful engagement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then they could always come back to you with questions later, but
or help negotiating a specific transaction, or reviewing a new scenario that wasn't built in. But what we really want is them to become kind of the IP planning expert. And we've transferred that knowledge and that skill set over to our clients.
Good. Okay, so Brian, I know that you have something for our guests today that just gives a little bit more detail into how things are done. So tell us about that. And guys, you can access this on the show notes page.
Okay, so this is the Nevium IP Strategy Services flyer, which is really just an invitation to ask us some more questions about these services. But it does describe from a pretty high level a lot of the questions that our clients are kind of struggling with, right? And we find that those are questions like, hey, are the royalty rates I'm getting fair or appropriate? Or we've been spending all this money on R&D. What are we getting from it? Or better yet, we've been spending all this money on marketing. What's the return on that investment?
Marketing is always an extremely important one, but an extremely difficult one to pinpoint with ROI.
So the return on marketing investment, or ROMI, is something that we kind of, it's never the first question that someone asks. They often say, I'm trying to think about the value of my brand, but what they often really mean is, we've spent a lot of money on this brand. What is it doing for us? And so, our evaluation and analysis helps people answer those types of questions. And so questions like that are in this little short flyer, as well as kind of a brief description of how we like to structure the engagements when we're working with our clients. And what we like to do is kind of build multiple phases into the assignment, where the initial phase is kind of gathering that market research and increasing the client's knowledge of what's going on around them, their competition, the industry, the marketplace. To later phases where we're helping them really develop and build out that IP plan, building those models that we're going to then teach them to use so they can evaluate opportunities to leverage their IP. And then the later phases, which we can often do on kind of a success fee basis, is if we're sitting alongside the client, helping them negotiate a license or find a potential acquirer or find potential acquisitions. So those transaction-based services we'll do on a success basis. In other words, we don't get paid as much unless our client gets success in their transactions.
Yeah. Okay. So where, after our listeners reference this sheet, where can they find you, and what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, the best is our website, which is nevium.com, or nevium.com. That's probably the first question we always get asked is, what does your name mean and how do you spell it?
So what does it mean?
We made it up. It's just look, we help people figure out what to do with their brand, so we needed a brand of our own. And so we made up a word where the domain name was available, the trademark was available, and we made sure we had clean ownership rights.
You're practicing what you preach, for sure.
If we can't do it, it's hard to tell our clients to do it, right? So Nevium.com is a great place to go. We tend to break the website up into two different types of services we provide, the strategy services and then the expert witness services. The expert witness services come into play when maybe someone's accusing your company of infringing on their IP.
Okay.
Or you believe someone else has been misusing your intellectual property assets. And we'll get hired by your litigation attorney to help quantify the impact or the damages from those events. So it's a different side but similar toolkit to what we do when we're helping people leverage their IP to make more money.
Good. And who doesn't want to make more money?
All right.
So, well, thank you for being on the show today. And I took away a lot of value. So hope everyone did too. And check out the website, and we will talk with you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to another episode of InspiredByAMUA.com. And I know it's a tough road out there to develop products, and we can all use some support. So guess what? You can find that on Facebook. So if you go to Facebook and you search Inspired by AMUA, we have our own group in there. So feel free to meet others and chat and figure out where they are in development, what they're doing, and just kind of share resources. So we look forward to seeing you in there. And until next time, hang 10 and AMUA.
Mahalo for joining us. If you're new to riding the waves of medical device product development, or if you've been in development for a while already, Inspired by AMUA is here to surf with you. Want to be a master of the waves? Text HANG10, that's HANGTEN, to 44222. We'll send you the most common wipeouts companies make in product development so you can avoid them and reach master wave status. Again, that's HANG10 to 44222. We publish a new episode every Tuesday, so catch us at inspiredbyamua.com. AMUA!